Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Mr. Terry?
Yes, Your Honor. You know, it's interesting to sit there and listen to all that and realize she's got Schlemmer's doing her job. She's trying to find anything she can pick apart in the state's case, of course. She went through each witness and tried to find anything that they did wrong, any little tiny mistake. She spent a lot of time talking about Shirley Bass. And she ignored the strongest and the most important piece of evidence in this entire case. The words of her own client. The words of her own client. The first words that came out of his mouth when those deputies come in there to this horrific scene. She completely ignored that, ladies and gentlemen. She completely did. And in fact, I guess because she's ignoring it so hard, she didn't even get right what he said. He never said he was cleaning the gun. He said he was removing the magazine. That's how much she's ignored it, is that she didn't even get the words he said right. Listen to the tape. Listen to what he says. I was trying to take out the magazine and it went off. I wrote down the quote exactly. I never said anything about cleaning a gun. But she's not listening to those words because she doesn't want you to listen to those words.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper argument.
Sustained.
Those words are the strongest and most compelling piece of evidence in this entire case. She wants to tell you, well, that doesn't tell you who shot that gun. You know who tells you who shot that gun? He tells you who shot that gun. Jermaine Bass tells you who shot that gun. He said, I did it. And those deputies and those detectives began an investigation believing that man said it was an accident. So they want to look and see what's going on. And then it comes to light, this couldn't possibly be an accident with 5 shots. But he admitted it was him. And one of the last things Ms. Schlemmer said, something to the effect of, who is he protecting? Well, where's there any evidence he's protecting anybody? Well, I can tell you who he's protecting. He's protecting himself. Those words, that lie, was protecting himself. He's caught. Hand in the cookie jar. Children shot. He's in the house. Murder weapons in his drawer. He's holding the baby. What does he say? It was an accident. That's the first lie he could come up with, right? You couldn't blame Shirley. We don't even know Shirley was outside. He said Shirley was in her room. Shirley wasn't in that room, for sure. And why would he protect Shirley? Why would he protect Shirley Bass if she shot her children? He wouldn't do that. You know, earlier in the night, he was over there confronting her about whether she'd been drinking. Did you protect her? That common sense says to you, ladies and gentlemen, that it's not going to happen. No. He came up, he knew he was caught, he came up with the first lie he could think of. It was an accidental discharge. And they're like, wow, for both of them? Yeah. Yeah. I was taking out my magazine and it went off. But she wants you to ignore that. She barely even talked about it.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper argument and shifting the burden.
Improper argument sustained.
That is the strongest piece of evidence in this case. You can rely on that evidence and that evidence alone. That's an admission, ladies and gentlemen. He admitted to those deputies that he fired that weapon. Came up with a ridiculous excuse, but he admitted it. But he admitted it, leaving just enough truthful nuggets in it because he couldn't quite figure out the right way to lie. So that's what he says. Accidental discharge. Okay, that's the first thing he says. I was trying to take out the magazine and it went off. Right? They was both in bed. He said that. They was both in bed. No one told him where they were or what was going on or where they'd been shot. That's actually true. They were both in bed. How did he know that? How did he know they were both in bed? Because he's the one who pulled the trigger. They was both in bed. Physical evidence shows they were both shot in that bed. I was in their room. Now he even puts the room where they were shot. He's got the bed, the room. That's all true. So he's mixed in his lie with a little truth. I was in their room. They was both in bed. Where was Shirley? She was in her room. Again, those are his words, not my words. Not words by the Corporal Gabot. Not words from Anna Cox. Not words from Jennifer Michaelon. Not words from any of those people. Those are the words of the defendant, the man right there. So every time Ms. Schlemmer says, well, that doesn't tell you who shot the gun. Well, I'll tell you who told you who shot the gun. He did. So Ms. Schlemmer said, he said clean gun. That's not true. Another thing, and again, you need to rely on your own memory of the evidence. You need to rely on the evidence that you take back there with you. But she pulled that picture out to show the drawer open and the gun being... Watch the video camera, the body-worn camera of Daniel Jones when he goes in to clear that room. That drawer where that gun is found is almost completely closed. It may be open about this much. And it's clear that they opened it more to put the markers on there. So yes, in fact, the defendant did take that gun after his two children were shot in the head, and rather than lend aid or render aid to them, he took that gun and he walked through that house while his children were bleeding out in their beds, took the time to do that, remove the magazine. Oh, again, a little nugget of truth thrown in there with that lie. I was taking out the magazine. Yeah, he did take out the magazine. Why, when your children have just been shot in the head, are you taking the time to walk down the hallway, go into your bedroom, pull out the magazine, place the gun down in there with the magazine, and close the drawer? Does that make any sense to you, ladies and gentlemen? So that was the way he did that lie, but producing enough nuggets of truth that his statements actually had some truth in them. And only the only person, the shooter, would know what those statements were. Where they were shot is huge. We only know that from Anna Cox because Anna Cox, who's a bloodstain expert who you heard from, was able to tell you that based on the bloodstain pattern, there was only one place these two children were shot, and that was in that bed, in that little corner up there. They were both shot in the head up in that northwest corner of the bed. And he knew that. They was in bed. He knew that scene. He knew where they were. I mean, that's as close to a confession as you're going to get, ladies and gentlemen. He's actually giving you details about the crime. The location. Specific enough to where they were in the bed. The shooter would know that. The person who pulled the trigger would know that. That is the strongest and most compelling evidence in this case. And to ignore that, because the medical examiner wrote upward trajectory instead of downward trajectory, or the vice versa, would be an injustice. Don't lose sight of the forest through the trees. Don't ignore the strongest and most compelling evidence of this case, because the crime scene investigator wrote bottom bunk instead of top bunk. She made a mistake. So not only do his words follow along with the evidence perfectly, other than the accident. That's the part he didn't want to admit. He didn't want to admit his intent. That was an accident. I'm
Object,
sorry.
Your Honor, comment on silence.
Overruled.
So instead of saying his intent, which was to kill those kids, it came out as, oh, it's an accident. But on top of that, the physical evidence also corresponds with that. The location, just where he said they were. Where they were shot, just where he said they were. His DNA is on the gun. He knew where that gun was. They'd be like, where's the gun? Where's the gun? It's on the dresser. Well, it's in the dresser. He knew. How did he know? Because he put it in there. Who does that? A man with a guilty conscience. A man who's trying to hide away the murder weapon. That's who does that. If this had been an accident, if someone else had done it, do you think he would take the time or bother to go and put the gun away? No, of course not. And it's no coincidence that gun was next to his wallet, because that's his gun. And you stuck it down in there. The shots were from off the bed. That's clear. If the shots to Jayla were from a person on the bed, meaning JJ, there would have been sticking, ladies and gentlemen. There's no way that he would not have been shot within 12 inches, she would not have been shot within 12 inches. And there would have been some evidence of a close range fire if JJ had fired that gun. There would have been evidence of a close range fire. That gun was fired from off the bed, at least 2 feet away. Who could have done that? Not JJ. Oh, I know who could have done it, the man who admitted that he did it. Ms. Schlemmer says, you know, she knows me, she knows I'm going to talk about transfer. Of course I'm going to talk about transfer DNA. And yes, that is a very heavy statistic. So I have no doubt that JJ touched that gun, or that some fluids from JJ in some manner or another transferred from the hands of that man onto that trigger and grip. And remember, when she says trigger grip, she swabs the entire grip where you hold the gun as well as the trigger. So it could have come from the trigger, or the grip, I mean, it could have come from the trigger, or trigger could come from anywhere. But yes, that was transfer DNA. Now, possibly, and as we know, one of these shots goes awry. 5 shots were fired, 4 hit their target, 1 went awry. It went into the wall and into the bathroom. How could that maybe have happened? Maybe JJ, in an attempt to save his life, grabs the gun and pushes it away from his head. From them. And the gun goes up and shoots away from him. Maybe JJ did grab that gun. Maybe it was transferred DNA. But there's no evidence that JJ would have shot this gun. He's an 8-year-old boy. No evidence he had any animosity with his sister. Any issues with his sister. Those shots were targeted. But also remember, he shot himself. Are we to suggest that he shot his sister 3 times, then shot into the wall, and then shot himself in the head? Oh, and hit his hand at the same time? He didn't shoot that gun. That's silly. It's silly to believe that he would shoot his sister and shoot himself. And that just makes no sense, ladies and gentlemen. No sense. So yes, his DNA was on there, but it's easily explained. You know whose DNA is not on there? The person Ms. Schlemmer's talked about the most in the first half of her closing, Shirley Bass. She is excluded from the grip and trigger. Excluded. She did not hold that gun that night. If she had held that gun and fired those shots, you better believe some of her DNA would be on that gun. She did not have that gun. There's zero physical evidence whatsoever that suggests Shirley Bass did this. You know, and I know that you all may be sitting here wondering, we didn't get to hear from Shirley. I wonder what she said. Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. You did hear from Shirley. All of you did. You heard from her in that 911 call. And I urge you very hard to listen to that call. Listen to it, compare it with the video we have of her outside Daquan Evans' apartment. Listen to how her voice changes, timeline and everything. Because I'm going to suggest to you what happens. And you watch this and you will see that this is in fact what happens. And listen to the audio carefully and you will hear this. First of all, notice that when she is outside, the very first time she's outside, and you need to watch the video very closely, and it's hard to see sometimes, but if you watch it enough times, you will know where the door is to the Bass household. You will see her come out, and she comes out at 20:21:15, which is 10:21. So she comes out a while before she ends up at Daquan Evans' house. And watch her out there. You'll see her in the parking lot, and she's kind of walking like this, and then she'll walk, and then she kind of walks another way, and then you'll see her walking this way before she ever comes to the area where Daquan Evans is. She's out of that house for a while. So what does she say when she's on that phone call? You hear her. She's frantic. She's terrified. She can't believe what's going on. She knows there were gunshots in her house. She says, someone shot my whole family. She's petrified. She doesn't know what's going on. She knows there were gunshots. And then she says, I don't know what happened in this house. She doesn't know. She didn't see it. She tells you right there, I don't know what happened in this house. She knows there were gunshots in her house. That she's scared for the safety of her family. But she says, I don't know what happened in this house, but she is scared. You can hear that in her voice. But she's not super confrontational, right? You can just hear she's like scared, and she's not making a lot of sense when she talks. But then watch on the video. She has that phone for about 2 minutes and 20 seconds or so, 2 minutes, 40 seconds. And you'll see she starts walking back into the parking lot, and she heads back to the house. And look at the house. You'll see the door open. And that's when she first screams, and really loud, clearly not at the 911 operator, as they would have you believe. She's clearly speaking to someone out there, and she says, what the fuck is wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you? You know who she's talking to? She's talking to that man right there. What the fuck is wrong with you? Because she knows he did something. She knows he had that gun, and she knows he did something. But she doesn't seem to really know what yet at this point, because you don't see her say anything, and then she calls him, you fucking asshole. And apologize for my language, but I'm trying to quote to you exactly what was said on that day, on that phone call, which I urge you to listen to. But it's at the 2-minute and 40-second mark. Her voice, her inflection, everything changes, because at that moment, she is now seeing Jermaine Bass, and she's seeing him holding her boy. She says, that man was playing with his freaking gun. I don't know what the fuck happened. Again, I don't know what the fuck happened. She doesn't know. All she knows is that her husband, of all people, had a gun, and suddenly gunshots are going off, and he walks out with his son in his arms. And that's when there's a realization, because you'll hear that now suddenly she starts to give some more specific. My babies, my kid been shot. She doesn't say my kids, she said my kid. Singular. At this point in time, she probably doesn't even know Jayla's shot up there. But now she's seeing JJ. Bring the ambulance. My son is bleeding. My son. Again, she doesn't say Jayla. Why? Because at this point in time, she was outside and she sees her husband come out and he's got the boy. She doesn't even know what's going on with the girl. She doesn't realize that her daughter is dying upstairs. This is Shirley's testimony, ladies and gentlemen. Unfiltered, raw, emotional, at the time, the most trustworthy statement you could possibly get from an individual is when they're in the experience at the moment going through it. And what is she telling you, ladies and gentlemen? She doesn't know what's going on, but she knows something bad is happening in her house, which means she's not there, she has nothing to do with it, she's not involved with it. The phone disconnects. You hear it come back in. If you listen, you can tell there's an echo. She's inside that house at that point. She yells at him, leave him alone, don't touch him. She says, I swear to God, if my son died, and you can hear all this on that phone call. And yes, she's very rude to the 911 operator, but remember, she's now realizing that her son is shot in the head. She doesn't know what's going on, she doesn't understand it, but she knows that that man right there, Jermaine Bass, has something to do with it. That man playing with his freaking gun. You know, Ms. Schlemmer wants to talk about how uncooperative Ms. Bass was. What did the detective tell you? On the day this happened, while her daughter is lying there dead, and her son is in a coma in the hospital, she spends an hour talking to him about this. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. This woman, whole world has just exploded. Everything has exploded. The husband, the man she's in love with, is now being investigated or believed to have shot and killed her daughter, and her son, who could potentially die, is there in the hospital. Her mind is reeling. And Ms. Schlemmer wants to sit here and talk about her cooperation. She spent an hour. Corporal Gabo told you, she spent an hour talking to me. And he went back the next day and talked to her for even longer. And Ms. Schlemmer wants to call her uncooperative? You know what uncooperative is? Is lying to police. Who do we know did that? Mr. Bass. She wants to get up here and tell you, well, he was cooperative that whole time. No, he wasn't. How is lying to police cooperative? They based you heard Corporal Gabo, we based our investigation on what he said happened. They weren't looking for a whodunit or who's the other person that might have done this. He told them I did it. But it was an accident. So that's how they're basing their investigation. So again, remember, we talked to you earlier, we don't have to prove motive, okay? And I think you all understood that, and we went through that in some great detail. But I told you, you're going to get some evidence that something was not right, and I think you heard it. You heard it from China Gadsden, who got up here. And she told you that she was being aggressively tailgated as she left Ruth's Chris. And that's why we presented all that evidence to you, to show you and to corroborate what China said to you. Because we know that that man left those kids alone, got in his Nissan Titan truck. We see him pulling out from the residence. We see him driving down Fletcher towards the interstate. We have his phone records that show his phone going all the way down to West Shore, where he's there for a couple of hours. Not sure what he's doing there, but he's there, waiting, until Shirley leaves, at which point he aggressively tailgates her. What is this guy doing? She doesn't know it's him. The only evidence of anyone being aggressive, acting abnormal that night, is that man seated right over there. Not Shirley. How was Shirley? Shirley was fine. She was just normal. She was happy. It was her sister's birthday. We were all out at dinner. The only person with any sort of aggression that night was that man seated right over there. And we proved to you, ladies and gentlemen, that. And we don't have to prove to you motive, but something was not right. He was clearly upset with Shirley for some reason. You don't follow your spouse to a dinner, wait outside, and then aggressively tailgate your spouse is leaving the dinner, and then get up in front and stop him from driving anywhere, and then go up and accuse him of drinking. You don't do that unless there's something very, very wrong. Jermaine Bass took that anger home and unleashed it on his children. Whether to punish Shirley Bass or for whatever reason, we don't know, but he took that anger out and he put it into his children. Again, zero physical evidence to suggest Shirley Bass had anything to do with this. In fact, everything seems to indicate the opposite. You see her behavior, you see her franticness after this happens. You hear that 911 call. And I'm telling you right now, listen to that 911 call. That is raw, that is pure, that is when a person is experiencing the moment. And you can tell she doesn't know what's going on. She is frantic and scared. But the few moments that she says anything that you can tell that she knows something happened, is she is accusing that man right there. What the fuck is wrong with you? You know, Shirley was the one trying to attempt to get help for her kids. We know Mr. Bass had his phone with him because he made a phone call. While Shirley's out there going, get that ambulance here, send an ambulance. Is Mr. Bass calling 911? And Ms. Schlemmer says, well, Shirley was doing that. How does he know what Shirley's doing? She was out there. She was outside. She was outside trying to find a man to help her. Someone who could give her a phone so she could call 911. Most likely because she was too terrified to go back in the house, not knowing what's in there. So she finds a man who helps her, gives her a phone and calls 911. And what is he doing with his phone? He's calling his mom. He's not calling for help for his children who have just been shot. Is that what a father does?
Objection, Your Honor, improper argument.
Sustained.
This was an accident. I think the first thing you want to do is call and get some help. Certainly not put your gun away neatly and close the drawer and call mom. There were 4 people in that household. Jayla's gone. JJ, Shirley, and Jermaine are in there. And I've shown you, I believe, and proved to you that Shirley could not have done this. She is excluded from the DNA on that gun. She never touched that gun. At least not the grip or the trigger. Physical evidence does not connect Shirley in any way to this case. Her behavior afterwards is typical of a person who's just gone through a serious traumatic event. What's not typical was the behavior of the father, of Jermaine. So the only other question is, Jermaine or JJ? Well, remember, don't ever forget this, the father is the one who admitted he shot that gun. And that's why Ms. Reeder spent so much time with that crime scene investigator to talk about the angles and everything like that. to show you, ladies and gentlemen, that that shooting came from off the bed. And we know JJ was shot on the bed. And then also ask yourself this. Two people, right? Those two. JJ shot himself in the head? That doesn't make sense. But again, no evidence of close-range firing. The angle from which those shooting shows that the shooting came from off the bed. This was not JJ. JJ had nothing to do with these shots. JJ was innocently laying there with his sister, and that man walked in and brutally shot them both. That's what happened. It's so simple. It's right there in front of you, ladies and gentlemen. And you can pick apart a medical examiner's report of up or down.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. Improper argument, denigrating the defense.
Sustained.
We can look at little things like that, but what we don't forget and don't miss the biggest stuff in this case. The strongest, most compelling, biggest piece of evidence. And that is the statements from Jermaine Bass on that night and the statements from Shirley Bass on that night. Look at that physical evidence, and you will know that these shots came from off that bed. That excludes JJ. No DNA of Shirley, that excludes Shirley. That leaves that man right there, and guess what? That man admitted he did it. Very simple. This is not a complex case. There is no doubt whatsoever that on that night, on August 29th, 2022, Jermaine Bass, who told you he did, told those deputies that he did, that Jermaine Bass shot and killed his own daughter, Jayla Bass, and tried to shoot and kill his son. That, ladies and gentlemen, is murder in the first degree, premeditated, because look at the placement of those shots. This reader showed you that. There is a picture of Jayla Bass, and you can see those 3 shots, well placed, all within a very close range. Does anyone think an 8-year-old boy could do that? Really? Sure, an 8-year-old boy can fire a gun, but with that kind of precision and accuracy? That takes someone who knows how to fire a gun. You know, we did introduce a lot of evidence of a lot of other bullets. That's to show that Mr. Bass knows guns. Yes, there's clips, holsters, there's all sorts of stuff. There's that one thing where it has all the bullets in it. We presented that evidence to you, ladies and gentlemen, and proved to you and show you this was not an accident. This man knows guns and knows how to fire guns. He knows how to aim that gun. And he put those 3 bullets into the head of his daughter. And he put that 1 bullet into his son, who still has to deal with that 1 bullet. That's first-degree murder. That's attempted first-degree murder. And that is aggravated child abuse. Both counts. It's not only premeditated murder, it's felony murder, because he is guilty of aggravated child abuse for what he did to those children, and that makes it felony murder. And I am convinced, ladies and gentlemen, that when you go back there, use your common sense. Think about what is the evidence to best rely on. The state has no doubt that you will return a verdict for guilty as charged on all 4 counts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so it is almost 6 o'clock. My intention, unless you would like to vote to overrule me, is to go ahead and release you for the night, to come back tomorrow and begin your deliberations fresh tomorrow. If you would like to overrule me, I see a bunch of you nodding already, and would like to start deliberations tonight, I will certainly stay here and allow you to do that. But I see by the number of you packing away your materials that no one wants that option. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So a couple of additional admonitions, other than the usual, no discussion about the case, no watching the news or local media or any reading anything related to the news. But most importantly is my admonition about not coming to any definite, fixed, or final opinions on what you've heard. So a natural reaction is, oh, I've heard everything. I've heard the evidence. I've heard the final arguments to the lawyers. I've heard most of the law. There's a little bit left to read. But the reality is you have not engaged in the most important part of your deliberation process, and that's discussing the evidence with everyone else. So sometimes when I discharge people at the end of the day, they go home and come to such a resolute idea about how they're going to vote that it makes it hard for them to interchange information with everyone the next day. So I'm going to ask you to please try to do everything but that. Come to some final fixed opinions on what you've heard, that you're not able to intelligently discuss it with everyone tomorrow. Does everyone understand where I'm coming from? So just, keep your final thoughts to yourself. Allow for a thorough and usual debate on the evidence and deliberation tomorrow. So don't come to any such fixed opinions that you prevent yourself from doing that tomorrow, in other words. Any logistical questions before I let you go about any of those admonitions? All right. So same time, meet the bailiffs, 8:45. So I'll get you back in here. We'll finish up just some very brief instructions that I have left to give you, and then you'll retire to begin your deliberations. So have a great night and a safe way home, and thank you for your patience. I know it's been a long day for you with a lot of information. So thank you very much for that.
All right.
While we're all still here and on the record, talk to
Mr. Romeo.
Mr. Romeo. Mr. Romeo in our front row. Will you come forward for just a minute for me? Come on up. Yeah.
Sorry, come step up.
Yeah, right there is fine. If you would tell me your full name.
Richard Romeo.
Okay, and you are related in some fashion to Shirley Bass, the mother of the victim children in this case. Is that correct?
That's my daughter.
How is that relation?
Very good.
No. I meant, how are you related specifically? Are you her father,
Yeah, I'm a
father-in-law?
dad. Yeah. No, I'm a dad. I thought I said yes.
You're her dad?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to make sure, because you're not a witness in this case, obviously.
No.
But the rule of sequestration has been invoked, which means the witnesses cannot talk to each other about the testimony that happens here in the courtroom. By virtue of your occupation with the local news channel, you've been recording the proceedings and participating in the news reporting in some form or fashion with your company. My inquiry to you is, have you used any of that material that you all have recorded, or have you engaged in any discussions with any witnesses or the parties in this case about what's happening in the courtroom?
No, Your Honor, I have not.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Any contact with jurors?
Oh, any contact with the jurors at all?
No, I don't know him. No.
I know, but you haven't come
No.
in contact with them, or
No, Your
obviously showed them anything about the case, or
No.
any discussions with them?
No.
All right.
I have no other questions.
All right, I just wanted to put that on the record because it's kind of unusual that halfway through the proceedings we became known of, you obviously knew that, but we had no way to know that. So I just want to make sure that the record's clear that nothing inappropriate has happened by virtue of your relationship and your job.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
you read Jermaine Bass sometimes when it was printed in the jury instructions, Jermaine Lavonda Bass. So just want to make the record clear that the instructions themselves distinguish that anytime it's referring to my client, it's Jermaine Lavonda Bass, and anytime it's referring to his son, it does say Jermaine Bass. And I know
All right,
because
and
there
now,
were 22 pages, sometimes you read it
right,
the other way, but it's clear in the instructions who it's referring to.
sure, and if you want me to point that out before I finalize the instructions to the jurors tomorrow, I will, because I am gonna point out that to them that the three changes I've made to the final instruction. One is on page 2 of 22, in intro to homicide, in deciding if the killing was first-degree murder or any lesser included, it should be offense instead of defense. So I changed that in these and highlighted it.
You read it correct, you read it as offense.
I know,
You fixed
but.
it as you read it, yes.
And on page 4 of 22 that we already pointed out in the record, while engaged in the commission of an aggravated child abuse on either Jayla Bass or Jermaine Bass in counts 2 and 3, or any lesser charge on those counts, I crossed out or any lesser charge on those counts and just struck through that language because it does not apply to the lesser counts. And then on the verdict form, as I read to them, I didn't put a yes or no on one of the interrogatories. On page 22, under A, did the discharge cause great bodily harm to the victim? I didn't write yes or no, and I have on the official verdict form. So I'm just gonna highlight to them those changes that I make, so I'll be happy to point out the difference in the Jermaine Lavonda Bass and Jermaine Bass, if you want me to do that tomorrow as well, and tell them to rely on the written instructions.
Yes, I think that would just be safest. I know in the verdict form itself, it refers to the son as JJ.
Yeah.
And I know there's been a lot of talk about Jermaine Bass Jr. or
Sure.
the son or the father. So just to let them know, I think it's pretty clear, but just to remind them.
Sure. Just remind me in the morning to do that, and I will.
Okay.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, anything else? All right, then I'll see you at 8:45.
Court's adjourned.